When we think of giant land predators, our minds immediately conjure images of Tyrannosaurus rex, the undisputed king of the Cretaceous. But the fossil record, our ultimate book of evidence, reveals a startling truth. The blueprint for a giant terrestrial hunter was drafted long before T-Rex ever walked the earth. Our investigation takes us back 220 million years to the Late Triassic of Argentina, a time when the first dinosaurs were small, skittish creatures living in the shadows. The case file opens with a single, confounding piece of evidence: a vertebra, a piece of a backbone so massive it seems chronologically impossible, dwarfing any contemporary dinosaur. This fossil doesn't fit the accepted narrative. It's an anomaly, a clue that points to a true monster, a predator that achieved a colossal scale millions of years ahead of schedule. So, the central question of our investigation becomes clear. Who was this Triassic tyrant? And how did it come to dominate a world we so often, and so wrongly, call the dawn of the dinosaurs? The evidence is waiting. The vertebra was our inciting incident, the piece of the puzzle that didn't fit. To find its owner, our investigation zeroes in on the fossil beds of the Ishigualasto Formation in Argentina. Here, amidst the bones of early dinosaurs and strange mammal-like reptiles, we find the remains of our prime suspect. It was named Fasolasuchus tenax, the strong Fasola crocodile, and it was not a dinosaur. It belonged to a group of reptiles called the Rauisuchian, a lineage of archosaurs more closely related to modern crocodiles, but adapted for a fully terrestrial life of predation. When we begin to assemble the forensic evidence from its skeleton, the scale of this animal is staggering. This was not just a large predator, it was a Triassic titan. Estimates based on the fragmentary but massive fossils place Fasolasuchus at a conservative 8 meters, with some suggesting it could have reached a terrifying 10 meters in length. To put that into perspective, it was as long as a city bus and likely weighed over 3 tons. It was, without question, the largest terrestrial carnivore on the entire planet during the Late Triassic, and one of the largest non-dinosaur predators to have ever lived. When we examine the skull, we see a weapon of immense power. It was deep, robust, and housed a set of teeth that are a crucial piece of evidence. Unlike the conical, prey-gripping teeth of a crocodile, the teeth of Fasolasuchus were recurved and laterally compressed, like finely serrated steak knives. These were blades designed for one purpose: to shear through flesh and bone with devastating efficiency. This was a hyper-carnivore, built to hunt and dismember the largest animals in its environment. As we dig deeper into its anatomy, the profile of this killer becomes even clearer. Its relationship to crocodiles is a critical distinction in this case. While dinosaurs were evolving on a separate branch of the archosaur family tree, the one leading to birds, Fasolasuchus represented the pinnacle of the crocodile line branch. Its posture was another key feature. It wasn't a sprawler like its modern cousins. nor was it fully erect like a dinosaur. It possessed a pillar-erect stance, where the limbs were held directly beneath the body. This provided far greater stability and efficiency for moving its massive frame across land than any sprawling reptile could manage. It was an animal built for walking the earth. But perhaps the most peculiar clue we find on its skeleton is its armor. When we analyze the fossils of its relatives, like the fearsome Fasolasuchus from North America, we find multiple rows of bony plates, called osteoderms, running down their backs, creating a formidable defensive shield. Fasolasuchus is the exception. The evidence points to it having only a single row of these scutes. Why would the largest and most powerful of its kind have less armor? This is where forensic deduction comes into play. Some paleontologists theorize this wasn't for defense against other species. What, after all, could hunt a Fasolasuchus? Instead, it may have been for combat with its own kind. A single, reinforced line along the spine could have provided crucial protection during lateral attacks from rivals in brutal, intraspecific battles for territory or mating rights. It suggests an animal so dominant, its only true threat was itself. Now, let's place this tyrant at the scene of the crime alongside the other residents. The Ishiahualasto Formation is also home to some of the earliest dinosaurs we've ever found, creatures like Herrerasaurus and Eoraptor. But when we compare them to our suspect, the power dynamic becomes starkly evident. Herrerasaurus, a formidable early predator in its own right, reached perhaps 4 meters in length, half the size of Fasolasuchus. It was an ankle biter by comparison. The fossil evidence is undeniable. These animals shared the same slice of time and space, but they were not competitors. The first dinosaurs were the underdogs, small, agile creatures forced to survive in a world governed by a terrestrial crocodile of monstrous proportions. Our case is building. The evidence has given us a suspect, a weapon, and a clear picture of its overwhelming dominance at the scene. We have built a compelling case for the identity of our Triassic tyrant. We have its size, its weaponry, and its physiological profile. But a true investigation must go beyond identifying the perpetrator. It must reconstruct the crime scene and understand the broader impact. What does the reign of a predator like Fasolasuchus tell us about the world it inhabited? When we connect the forensic evidence to the ecological story, we uncover a brutal but fascinating truth. Fasolasuchus wasn't just living in its environment. It was actively shaping it, dictating the terms of survival for every other creature, especially the earliest dinosaurs. Let's visualize the hunt. With its massive frame and pillar-erect stance, Fasolasuchus was no marathon runner. Its strategy was not pursuit, but ambush. This was a predator that relied on overwhelming power and surprise. We can picture it lying in wait, concealed in the low-slung Triassic vegetation, its sheer bulk hidden until the last possible moment. its primary targets would not have been the small, fleet-footed dinosaurs. A predator of this size requires a substantial meal to justify the energy expense of a hunt. The fossil record of the Ischigualasto Formation provides a clear menu. The landscape was dominated by large, slow-moving creatures. Chief among them were the dicynodonts, like the lumbering, hippo-sized Ischigualastia. These barrel-chested, tusked reptiles were abundant and would have represented a primary food source. An attack would have been a terrifying spectacle of violence. A short, explosive charge, followed by the catastrophic impact of its blade-like teeth. This was the ecological engine at work. Fasolasuchus at the top, culling the herds of giant herbivores that defined the landscape. Now, we must consider the most crucial part of this story: the impact on the underdogs. Where do the first dinosaurs fit into this picture? For them, the world was a landscape of fear. The ground itself would have announced the approach of the apex predator. In this environment, the traits that would one day make dinosaurs rulers were forged in the crucible of survival. Being small was not a primitive characteristic. It was a life-saving adaptation. It allowed them to hide, to occupy niches that a 10-meter giant couldn't exploit. Being fast and agile, a hallmark of early theropods, wasn't just for chasing insects. It was for escaping the earth-shattering charge of a Rauisuchian. The reign of Fasolasuchus and its kin created an immense evolutionary pressure. It effectively locked the dinosaurs out of the top predator role. For millions of years, they were suppressed, forced to diversify in the shadows. This suppression, however, had an ironic consequence. It forced dinosaurs down an evolutionary path that favored efficiency and speed. They developed lightweight, hollow bones and incredibly efficient respiratory systems that allowed them to do more with less. They were honing the very tools they would need to inherit the Earth. So when we look at the ecology of the Late Triassic, we are not seeing the dawn of the dinosaurs. We are seeing the climax of the crocodile-line archosaurs, a dynasty of terrestrial tyrants whose dominance inadvertently shaped their successors. Fasolasuchus was the king, and its reign created the very conditions that would allow the underdogs to one day take the throne. The evidence is in, and the case file on the Triassic's top predator can now be closed. Our investigation began with a single, anomalous bone that challenged the conventional timeline of giant carnivores. Following the clues, we identified our suspect, Fasolasuchus tenax, a 10-meter terrestrial crocodile that represented the pinnacle of a terrifying dynasty of Rauisuchian reptiles. We have established its methods, that of a powerful ambush predator, and its motive, simply to survive and dominate as the undisputed apex of its food chain. Most importantly, we have seen the consequences of its reign, an era of suppression that shaped the very evolution of the first dinosaurs, forcing them into the shadows. Therefore, the verdict is clear. The common narrative of a Triassic world being the dawn of the dinosaurs is fundamentally flawed. The evidence overwhelmingly shows that this period was the climax of the crocodile line archosaurs. It was Fasolasuchus and its kin who were the true tyrants, perfecting the role of the giant land predator millions of years before Allosaurus or Tyrannosaurus. But, as with any great investigation, closing one case only reveals a deeper, more profound mystery. If Fasolasuchus was so successful, so perfectly adapted to its role as a super predator, why did it vanish? At the end of the Triassic, some 201 million years ago, a catastrophic extinction event swept the globe, and the entire dynasty of Rauisuchians was wiped from the face of the earth. The ultimate question, the true cold case, is this: what environmental force could possibly eradicate these titans, yet spare the very underdogs that lived in their shadow? The fall of this forgotten king serves as a powerful reminder that dominance in the story of life is never permanent. The verdict on Fasolasuchus proves that entire dynasties can rise and rule, only to be erased by time, leaving behind just enough evidence for us to piece together their story. Beneath our feet, countless other cases lie dormant, waiting for a single fossil clue to bring their lost